What's up, everybody? This should be a fairly short response video here, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. I recently came across a short video from a content creator here on YouTube called Anarch. The title of the video is Anarcho Capitalism is Coercive, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to clarify a few things. But let's just play it bit by bit and respond, shall we?
Hey everyone, Anarch here. So let's have a quick talk about why anarcho-capitalism is not anarchist.
I've noticed through watching a lot of debates here on YouTube between ANCOMs and ANCAPs that a lot of the conversation centers around contentions over definitions of these terms. ANCOMs define anarchism, capitalism, and coercion in ways that tend to differ pretty strongly from ANCAPs. So let's hear his definition of anarchism.
First of all, anarchism is the opposition to all hierarchical power structures, and yet capitalism is based on the hierarchy between the owning class and the laboring class.
See what I mean about definitions? Anarchism being defined as the total abolition of hierarchies may be a fair use of anarchism, but it's certainly not the only usage of the word. A little trip over to Merriam-Webster's online dictionary and we can find a much more useful definition. Quote, a political theory holding all forms of governmental authority to be unnecessary and undesirable, and advocating a society based on voluntary cooperation and free association of individuals and groups. And of course, dictionary definitions are descriptive and not prescriptive, but the definitions are based on common usage. Anarcho-capitalism absolutely falls under this definition of anarchism, as it holds governmental authority, and more specifically state authority, is illegitimate and undesirable. All association and activity under anarcho-capitalism should be entirely voluntary. In fact, that definition of anarchism more aptly applies to anarcho-capitalism than any form of communism or socialism. But we'll get to that in a minute.
The argument of anarcho-capitalists is that this is voluntary because the worker negotiates their wage with the capitalist. However, what real negotiation of wages can be had when the alternative is for the worker to starve to death, or to become houseless, or for their kids to starve to death or become houseless?
This critique of capitalism is extremely common for communists. He's saying capitalism is coercive because it requires individuals to sell their labor for wages in order to obtain basic human necessities for survival. The problem is that isn't actually true. So let's head back to Merriam-Webster, because capitalism is an economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of capital goods, by investments that are determined by private decision, and by prices, production, and the distribution of goods that are determined mainly by competition in a free market. Nothing about that necessitates selling one's own labor to obtain necessities. In fact, under capitalist systems, you could start your own commie utopia so long as everyone involved voluntarily agreed to enter said utopia. You and every other commie could homestead, trade, or contract your own land and create a Proudhonian or Kropotkin-esque mutual aid society within the realm of anarcho-capitalism. That's because anarcho-capitalism isn't really a place as much as it is a set of ethics derived from natural law. So long as no one is being coerced or aggressed upon, it's perfectly okay to pursue whatever system you want. In fact, since coercion is anything that restricts voluntary association and action, the real coercion would be banning or restricting voluntary associations and exchanges, like the ones that are totally legitimate under capitalism. The real irony here that he's missing is it's actually communism that necessitates coercion because it abolishes private property rights, including the individual's right to sell their labor. After all, if the goal of anarchism is the liberation of the masses, then that liberation would include the right of individuals to engage in trades and transactions that all parties voluntarily agreed to, and that includes, you guessed it, the right to trade one's own labor for wages. To compare voluntary exchanges for labor for wages to an employer holding a gun to a potential employee's head is ludicrous, even for a commie. The employer needs the labor of the laborer every bit as much as the laborer needs the wages. And in a free market system with increased competition, workers have abundant options for employment. Again, that's even if we go with this typical wage work situation. And obviously as an ANCAP, I find all of the proposed socialist commie systems to be both incredibly immoral and unworkable. But even in those proposals, I've yet to hear even the most delusional communists pretend that a labor force won't be required in some way for future production. A lot of commies boast about a post-scarcity communist society in the future, but if that's even possible, it's going to necessitate a lot of labor. Hell, at least under capitalism, that labor won't be restricted to the authoritarian whims of the masses of economic illiterates violating natural law. So, in closing, needless to say, I'm not convinced. Later, y'all.